Hello everyone and welcome to this short webinar to look at good governance and charity regulation and the resources that are provided in Northern Ireland by the Developing Governance Group to support you as you implement good governance in your organisation. Today we have myself, Denise Hayward. I'm Chief Executive of Volunteer Now, and also with us today we have Brona. Brona, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi Denise, I'm Brona Whittaker and I'm the Head of Arts at Arts and Business Northern Ireland, also a member of the Developing Good Governance Group.
Thanks, Brona. So the Developing Good Governance Group has been working together over the last 10 to 12 years to provide resources and support to governance in the sector in Northern Ireland. The Secretariat is provided by myself, Denise Hayward, and also Denise Copeland from NICFA, and we have a range of membership organisations and groups who are supporting their members with good governance who are taking part. Those members have changed over the years or whatever, but we've all got that joint shared interest. And this is the third edition of the Code of Good Governance. If we have a look at the principles of the code, you can see that they're really about underpinning that governance function that trustees and management committees are performing in organisations up and down the country. And that is really looking at the function that the trustees and the members of the management committee have in terms of delivering organisational purpose, working as an effective team, maintaining control of the organisation, taking effective decisions and managing risk, acting with integrity and being open and accountable. And this version of the code, which was launched in November 2021, sets out those principles and then the key elements for good governance. It's really closely linked to your regulatory responsibilities through the Charity Commission for Northern Ireland. It's endorsed by the Charity Commission and it sets standards for organisations in providing good governance in Northern Ireland. So if we look at who the code's for, it's for voluntary and community sector organisations and charities, not-for-profit organisations. It's for community amateur sports clubs, social enterprises, trading subsidiaries, and also community interest companies. It's for a vast range of organisations and across a whole range of sectors. Lots of organisations of different shapes and sizes are using this code and the tools that support it, and hopefully you will find it useful. As we look at the resources in the last 18 months, we've been trying to develop more supportive resources for the code. We've got a boardroom poster as well as the small books that you can order through either Volunteer Now or NICFA. And so if you want to contact either of organisations, we can let you have some of those. And those boardroom posters are for you to put up in your meetings room where you regularly have your meetings, just to prompt you and remind you about the code and why it's important. The other resource that we've spent a lot of time working on in the last year is the DIY committee guide. And you can see there on your screens a QR code that will link you through to the DIY committee guide. And you can see the homepage just shown there for an example. The DIY committee guide has been restructured so that it follows the principles of the code, and it has a range of resources there to help you as you start to implement this work. And as we work through the short presentation today, we'll be able to see how the code links together and how the resources that we provided also will support you. Another piece of work that we've done is on the governance health check. Now, the governance health check's been around for some time, but what we have done is restructured it to meet the third edition of the code, and we've provided new questions that mirror the new issues and the new topics that are embedded in the new code. So, for example, the health check will provide that self-assessment questionnaire. It's got a sliding scale, met, partly met, not met, to help you decide where you are in relation to each item on the question box, to write your suggested evidence so that you can remember when you go back to look at it a few months later what it was that you did think that you'd kind of done to meet those requirements. It also allows you to provide an action plan, and then there's quite an extensive glossary and information to introduce it to help you use it for the best purposes. I would say with the health check, take it step by step. Don't feel you have to do it all the time, all in one go. Don't feel that it has to be you know, an unending piece of work, because it can feel overwhelming. So breaking it down is good. My experience as well is doing it as a team, a small group, is really, really valuable, because it means you can support each other and you can bounce ideas off each other, and it works better in that way. And then maybe that small group can report to the wider board about, you know, the ideas that you might need to implement and the new things that you might need to implement, as well as patting yourselves on the back for the great work that you're already doing. So it's really important to use it as a tool, and also be honest when you're doing it. Don't feel that anybody's looking over your shoulder. It's an internal document for you, so it's got to be something that's practical and works for you as an organisation. So we'll move on now to have a look in the detail of the principles. And for each principle, I'm going to start off by sharing what the principle is. Then we'll look at some examples of kind of questions that come up in the health check, and then how the DIY committee guide supports you to be able to develop the materials and the activities that you need to show good governance in those areas. So principle 1 is about understanding the committee's function in delivering organisational purpose. So that is underpinned by saying the members of the board are equally responsible in law for governance. They're collectively responsible for ensuring that the organisation remains faithful to its purpose. And then we go on to see that the sub-principles, the board will do this by ensuring that the purposes and rules set out in the governing document remain valid and relevant. Also by setting and upholding the vision, values and reputation of the organisation, understanding and fulfilling its legal duties, ensuring the stewardship of assets, ensuring appropriate organisational structures are in place, understanding the organisation's operating environment, developing and agreeing a long-term strategy, and reviewing and overseeing the organisation in the interests of its beneficiaries and or members. So you can see principle 1 is really about saying, we have got our governing document, we know we're delivering on what it says, we know that it's relevant and up to date. We're putting in place a framework and a structure to ensure that governing document is operationalised for us as an organisation. When we move on to the health check then, we can see an example of how this is laid out. And you can see what I mentioned there earlier, that you've got your principle at the top, and then there's a series of questions on the left-hand side that kind of help you to expand on the sub-principles and to show evidence of how you as an organisation are meeting them. And you can see there that scale, the not met, partly met, fully met, and the evidence that I mentioned earlier on. So there, we've highlighted one there, and the question is, have you reviewed your organisation's policies as appropriate and as required? And an example, if you just have a look at the DIY committee guide, you can see evidence there that the committee is well informed and appropriately advised, and is taking advice to meet its legal obligations, and that it's kept in touch with all its activities. And you can see there the link for, you can see a download link for policy log. And that policy log allows you to make a list of all the policies that you have, when they need reviewed, you know, when you first adopted them and when they need reviewed, so that you can keep on top of it as a committee, that you can kind of maybe pull it out once every few months and just check that you're on top of making sure everything's accurate and up to date. Another example within the health check would be complying with the governance arrangements in your governing document. And we in Volunteer Now take a lot of queries from organisations about governance, and regularly receive queries that really pertain to whether their governing document is up to date or not. It's easy to have a governing document and keep it in the drawer, never have a look at it, never get it out, and actually it is your Bible in terms of governance for your organisation. So, you know, the first question you ask yourself when you come across any issue or query is, what does it say in my governing document? So keeping it current, making sure that you're complying with things like the number of directors, those kinds of things, that's all really, really important. And you can record your evidence for that in the health check. And if you look on the DIY committee guide, you'll see lots of examples of materials about, appointment of directors and permissions around electronic meetings, and, how to run a meeting efficiently and run a meeting well. So that gives you a flavour of how you use the health check and the DIY committee guide to support your good governance. Brona's going to take you through some of the rest of the principles, and then I'll be back to wrap up at the end.
Thank you so much, Denise. So as Denise said, I'm going to be starting with principle 2, which is working as an effective team. And really, this is about ensuring that your board act as a group, a coherent, useful group, and not just as individuals who drop in when the meetings happen. So in this principle, the board will ensure that it has an effective balance of knowledge, skills, attitudes, and behaviours to deliver organisational purpose. So the board will lead by structuring meetings effectively, including preparation, frequency, recording, and communication, ensuring that all board members, including office bearers, understand and fulfil their respective roles, providing all board members with opportunities for training and development according to their needs, periodically reviewing their individual contribution, performance as a team, and finding, recruiting, and retiring board members to meet the organisation's changing needs in line with the governing document, taking into account skills, experience, and diversity, and providing suitable induction for new board members, accessing external advice when necessary, developing and maintaining a positive working relationship with the board and with volunteers and staff, ensuring that all members are able to participate fully at meetings and carry out their challenge function in an open and constructive way. So that's a really big one, but I think it's really important for us to think about how we use these wonderful people that have joined our organisation and how we get the best from them. And this section is really about ensuring that we've got the right tools. So as Denise said, underpinning for the governance health check is this the outlining of the questions we can ask ourselves and the evidence that we have to show that these functions are working well. So if you look at the first one there, are your board meetings and subcommittee meetings effective and properly run? And I suppose we all think about those meetings that go on for hours, and we think about maybe that we haven't captured the actions that help us effectively function after those meetings, because as we all know, it's the space between the meetings that can make a really exciting, fully functioning organisation. So the suggested evidence there would be an appropriate agenda and minutes, including records of decision made. And if you can correlate across to DIY committee, you'll see there's information there about how to structure our meetings effectively and to think about how we plan them so that we can get the best from those. And you can download the tools that will help us see how that can work best. And where that is, you can actually, because we all assume that we know how to run these meetings well, but in actual fact, there's certain things about those board meetings that are really quite important to happen. Things like ensuring decisions are made, ensuring that we know who's accountable for each of the decisions that are made, and that there was discussion given to those important issues that are discussed. So it's really useful to have that. I think one of the most useful things about tools like this is that it's shared amongst the board, that by being able to share documents like this, everybody's on a level playing field. And we can all understand what we're going into a meeting with, and we can see what best practice looks like. Because governance is a learning journey for every board member that joins an organisation, and this means people can learn together. And the next one that we'd be looking at, maybe has the board got clear role descriptions for board members? So often, and we've talked about this within our group, board members want to do their best, but they're not necessarily sure how to do that or what they're there to do. So understanding what that role description for chair, secretary and treasurer, and indeed other board members is there, they know how to do that job well. But finding that role description can be quite tricky. We want to understand what that role can look like at its best. Using DIY committee, you can go through and download those roles and responsibilities for various members of our board. And obviously these are adaptable for your own specific organisation, but this gives you a best practice foundation to work from so that you can look at the particulars of your own organisation and do it best. So, oftentimes starting that journey of a new board member can be one of the most crucial points. So if we have an induction pack, that means that new board member has the same information as other board members. And And the way that we know that we're doing that as well as we can do, we can have a look at what's in the induction pack itself. Are they meeting with the chair? Do they know where we work, and can they see where we're doing our business? And are they actually attending the things that we as organisations do? Oftentimes I'm asked about what could go into a good induction pack, and I often point, and will always point them to DIY committee, and you can see the list of things that go into a good induction pack. So we can see, for example, there that we know what the board is there to do. They can read some previous minutes. And one of the things that's so positive about a good induction is that it's a really democratic way for other board members. It knows that everybody's in the same level playing field, and we can ensure that board members join and catch up to be in the same position as those who've been there before them. It means they can contribute in the same way as somebody who's had a long-standing relationship with the board. Also, Denise mentioned that governing document. That's the centre of a lot of the decisions we make. They need to have that available to them so that they can understand what's the core of the organisation. Again, part of the role of this process is ensuring that all voluntary organisations have access to this information. Governance can often seem like a dark art, but actually this website allows you to act in the same way as our other larger and smaller organisations who we think are doing this really well. I would just like to concur with Denise fulsomely and say that this is an ongoing journey, and that none of us are ever perfect. Some things are always changing about our organisation: staff shape and size, our activities. And this just allows us, as we go along that journey to do our best and to try and comply in the best way that we possibly can. I often think that undertaking this process is one of the ways that shows that you're doing very well anyway. Principle 3, sometimes thought of as being one of the most important, although I would say that I think all 5 fit together really well and have their role together, and they really interconnect in an important way. Some can't exist without others. Principle 3 is about maintaining control, making effective decisions, and managing risk. So the board has ultimate responsibility for setting the vision and strategy and overseeing the activities of the organisation. So while the board may delegate some of its functions to paid staff, boards must regularly review internal controls, risks, performances, policies, and procedures by developing and monitoring organisational plans and budgets, evaluating results and assessing impact, ensuring proper agreements are in place for partnership working and service delivery, understanding and complying with all legal, contractual and regulatory requirements that apply to it, and implementing appropriate, up-to-date internal, financial and management controls. Regularly identifying and reviewing the major risks to which the organisation is exposed, including systems to manage those risks, ensuring that delegation to committees, staff and volunteers, as applicable, works effectively, and the use of delegated authority is properly documented and supervised, making proper arrangements for the recruitment, remuneration, supervision, support and appraisal of all staff, including the most senior member of staff, and making proper arrangements for managing and supporting volunteers. I suppose one of the things that I'd like to say at this point, and it's something Denise and I have talked about in the past, we work with, and Denise alluded to it earlier with the list of organisations that were outlined, we work with organisations of all shapes and sizes, and this code really is flexible to those shapes and sizes. So that list I've read may seem really onerous for some smaller organisations, but really it's entirely adaptable to the size of your organisation. And remember, this is a guide and a shape, but it's a really good place to start to think about what that might look like. And as you scale as an organisation, sometimes whenever things do get bigger and more complicated, this is a really good place to go. So in this code, maintaining control and effective decision and managing risks, one of the things that we might see is how an organisation can evaluate the results and assess the impact of its activity. Do we know that we're doing what we said we would do and that it's going well? So this gives you a really good list of the kind of ways that you could find that out as a board, because staff are on the ground and can see things happening. But as a board, do you actually know that things are going as they could go? There's a really great list there. Again, while long, it can be adaptable for size and scale of organisation. But if you go through to DIY committee, you can find the way that the different examples of how you capture results and understand the impact of the work of an organisation across the voluntary sector and those who are registered as charities. We know what our public benefit should be and could be. Sometimes we don't know that it's actually happening. So these are good ways to understand how the kind of cycle of evaluation that an organisation can have. Also, does the board, risk is a really thorny topic at the moment, because oftentimes a board thinks it's there to prevent organisations from taking risk. But risk can be healthy if an organisation is in a great place, but really understanding what that risk represents to the organisation is a really important thing. So does the board consider and manage risks, both short and long term, in all aspects of the organisation's work? All sorts of ways to understand what risk really means to an organisation. So there may be a risk register and what those risks might look like, but also looking back at how other decisions were made and how other risks may have been understood. So when we look at DIY committee and we look at the kind of things that help us understand what risk actually means and what our role in relation to risk as board members is, we can understand the different things that we can use to assess those risks and how we monitor them on an ongoing basis. So, for example, sorry, I jumped ahead quite fast there, and you can click through to identifying risks and understanding what risks really mean to the organisation. I'll jump to the bottom one there. Have you got appropriate staff management systems in place? Such a difficult topic for all of us, really, isn't it? We want to know that we're giving our staff the best experience in the organisations they're in. But one of the ways that we can do that is ensuring that they have entire clarity around their role. And ultimately, the board is the employer in this situation, and the board has the legal responsibility for those employment contracts. So if you look at the kind of lists of policies and procedures that are in place around employment in our organisations, there's quite a long list there. But really, some of them won't necessarily be applicable to all organisations, but it is a really important starting point. If we think about post-COVID, that flexible working policy, we're now spending kind of a balance of time between home and an office. Those are things that boards should have a good clarity around. If we click through here, we can look at the kind of resources that we have recommended to us. And what's really important about the DIY committee is that you can actually see those organisations who you can refer to for the right kind of advice and support in certain situations. So organisations like Labour Relations, and in fact NICFA, who provides Secretariat for the programme, such an amazing resource for this kind of area. So principle 4 is around acting with integrity. The board should act at all times with honesty and probity in the interests of the organisation and its beneficiaries and members. The board ensures that the organisation's performance and interaction with its stakeholders are guided by the values, ethics and culture put in place by the board. So what does that mean really in practice? The board should act according to high ethical standards, identify and understand and manage conflicts of interests and loyalty both within the board and across the organisation. The board should maintain independence of decision making, adopt a suitable code of conduct, have a clear and effective approach to promoting equality, diversity, inclusion and good relations within the board and throughout the organisation, encourage inclusive and accessible participation of beneficiaries and members, understand and comply with its safeguarding responsibilities, and develop and provide a safe and respectful culture for all. So again, this is really a very current topic for organisations, and I do find that organisations, just to flick back up to how that breaks down, for example, with equality, diversity and inclusion, that is an area that many boards I'm working with at the moment are really trying to improve the board's practice within this area. But oftentimes we don't really know where to start. And we find that we're not sure of where best practice lies and what's the best approach for us as an organisation to take. And that's where the governance health check can really become invaluable. So, for example, does your organisation work to promote diversity? Just going to read this out properly so that I get it right. How does your organisation work to promote equality, diversity, inclusion, and good relations throughout the organisation? Well, oftentimes we think we're doing our best, don't we? And boards would like to believe and do try to do their best in all of these situations. But this is where great policies can provide a great framework for actually putting that doing our best into practice. So, for example, we might have an equal opportunity or equality, diversity and inclusion policy, maybe some training for both board members and staff, and to consult, because where this topic becomes really important is that we want to think about what equality, diversity and inclusion means to those that we work with. It will mean something very different to every organisation. And really, as a board, we want to know that when we reflect out, we know the needs of the people that we're working with and the beneficiaries that we have. And that might be a very specific group. Also, equally, there may be a group missing whenever it's really important for that group to be included. So that's where that policy can be really invaluable, where you can flick over in the start of this really quite, it's not a difficult journey, but it's an evolving journey. And we learn more each year about this area. And it's been between the last code and this code, I'm sure Denise would agree that this is one of the areas where it's grown most in terms of the health check, and you can see much more evidence available and a really big degree of change. And that reflects both our changing society and our awareness that we could do better in this area. So if you look down there at EDI, if we think about how an organisation brings its EDI policy in line with its values, but I think that starts with each organisation itself. But you can think about the list there towards the bottom of our screen about the kinds of resources and tools that we can use to provide a better culture within our organisations. And I think it's key that that comes from the board down, or from the board across, really, in most organisations. I think setting that culture comes from within the board. So, as I say, that will be what's important to your organisation. It may be that you are ensuring that your activities are appropriate for particular groups, for example, relaxed performances for people on the autistic spectrum. So I work a lot with arts organisations, and it's really important for those I work with to ensure that families that their work is available to families of all shapes and sizes, of adults who have differing needs and who come at the work from a different starting point, but that those people are included as equally as all other audience members. And it's just to look out and find the resources that are there. So there may be equality, diversity and inclusion as a policy. I would say that's one that it's really important to think about how that works for your organisation specifically, but that's where a template can be invaluable, because you've got a starting position to work from and you can really reflect your own organisation within that space. I think that one of the big benefits of using this code or using the health check is that you can see the kind of evidence that other organisations might use, and it really opens a board's mind to all of the various tools that are available to them. So again, in that evolving journey to doing the best you can look at the kind of policies that you can add to the log, the kind of information that you can work on. And what I would say is, with equality, diversity and inclusion, reach out, ask the questions of the people you work with, and think about what it means to them to have good practice in that area. And I'm going to hand over to Denise. It's timely that we're talking about being open and accountable, because that's where we're putting ourselves out there. And Denise is going to talk through Principle 5.
Yes, you'll be delighted to know we're heading for the home straight here now, and we're talking about Principle 5, which is about being open and accountable. And the principle underpins, it says the board leads an organisation by being open and transparent and accountable and responsive. The board should ensure open and effective communication and engagement with beneficiaries, members and stakeholders about the organisation and its work. The board should consider organisational responsibilities to the wider community, society and the environment, to put in place arrangements to deal with complaints constructively, impartially and efficiently, ensure proper arrangements for the management of members as set out in the governing document, and demonstrate public benefit or impact in line with its organisational purposes. So how do we make this real then? If we have a look at the health check, and we can see there in the health check, questions around how you engage and respond to the views of your beneficiaries or their users. It's about thinking about who those people are, thinking about who your stakeholders are, who's interested in the work of your organisation, why are they interested in the work of their organisation? Are they just interested in a passing way? Are there regular users? What's their level of engagement? How much do they want to comment on? Think about how your service should be delivered, because you can see in the evidence there the suggestion of different levels of kind of questionnaires or meetings, or looking at feedback processes, because it's horses for courses with this. I mean, I think you need to develop a system that allows you to do really active engagement with the people who are most engaged with and most involved with your organization, so that you're really making sure that your services and your activities are the most positive that they can be for the people who use it the most. But then you're also thinking about who's not there, and how do we engage with people who are not there, and are we providing a service that's open to everybody and that gives people an opportunity to dip in and dip out, or whatever they feel comfortable with. So if you have a look on the DIY committee guide, you can see there some examples of how you might think about stakeholder engagement, identifying first of all who your stakeholders are, doing that bit of mapping, thinking about that as a committee, and then thinking about how you're going to really hear from, listen to, inform, engage the people who you're coming across through the course of your work. Then if you move on then to have a look at the next bit of the health check, you can see there about accountability. So how are you being accountable for the work? What happens if somebody isn't all that happy with the service that they've received? How can they provide you with that feedback? How can they, if the worst comes to the worst, make a complaint about the service that they've had? So you might want to think about whether you have a complaints process in place, or whether you have a policy, or how you deal with these kinds of issues. And again, on the DIY committee guide, you can see some information that will support you with this journey. So you can think about, there's information there about how you develop your complaints procedure, and again that aspect of whistleblowing for internally, if staff members or volunteers want to raise awareness about an issue that they're concerned about and that they don't feel that they've got a voice to raise perhaps within your organization. That material, that information is there for you on the DIY committee guide to link in with. If you have a look there, you can also see sort of downloadable documents like a complaints form and those sort of templates and things. And actually those templates are available across loads of issues on the DIY committee guide. And hopefully you'll find that to be a really useful resource for whatever you're kind of looking at as a board. So that brings us to the end of our short webinar today, to have a look at the code and the health check and the resources there to support the code. Over the next few months, we will be working through distribution of the codes. As I said, the codes are available. If you want them, you can contact NICFA or Volunteer Now, and we will be able to provide those through for you. You can also download the codes from the DIY committee guide itself, so that they're available for you in that way. It's a great resource to hand out to your committee as part of an induction or governance awareness or governance training. And those resources are freely available for you. As I said, we have done a range of information sessions with the Charity Commission, and we will look to continue to do some of those over the next sort of months as new issues and governance related topics emerge. But we will continue also to add resources to the DIY committee guide. We are constantly getting queries, just about how groups are using things, and that always makes us alert to the gaps and to things that we might need to add. But if you come across something you're looking for and you can't find it, then just drop an email through the function on the DIY committee guide, and we'll look to see if we can find a suitable resource that we can have in future to plug that gap. So thank you very much to Brona for taking part today. Thank you very much for you for listening and for taking time. And if there are any sort of queries or support that you have following this, please feel free to use the information function on the DIY committee guide. There's a query function there, and you send through your query and we will follow it up. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.